Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something a bit more pharmaceutical and a whole lot more insane. Welcome to the Victorian era, when respectable women became the most entertaining lunatics the 1800s ever produced. That's correct. Tonight we're exploring the infamous, the delicious, the absolutely wild time when physicians dispensed pure medical mayhem in glass containers. So before you settle in, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe, but only if you genuinely appreciate this kind of relaxing madness. Drop a comment letting me know your location and your current time. Now turn down those lights, switch on a fan for that comforting white noise and make yourself comfortable. Let's take a breath. Have you ever thought about why Victorian literature is packed with women collapsing, sobbing, or gazing through windows with the focus of an over-caffeinated barn owl? What precisely was inside those cryptic nerve remedies they consumed from miniature spoons? Did anybody bother checking the ingredients? Could you have made it through an epoch where the solution to everything was additional drugs? Why were so many refined ladies suddenly seized with the compulsion to redesign the sitting room at 3 a.m, compose 40-page romantic letters to the household pet, or conclude the piano required playing at maximum volume during midnight hours? And critically, if you awakened in Victorian Britain, would you qualify as a medical wonder or a medical crisis? Would you end up with your personal fainting sofa or your personal cushioned cell? Congratulations. You've just awakened in 1869 somewhere between a swooning couch and a drugstore that makes Burning Man appear temperate. Best wishes. You open your eyes to a universe decorated in soot and embroidered chair covers. The avenues resonate with the clatter of hooves and the faraway sound of somebody experiencing a mental collapse over afternoon tea. It's 1869 and the only thing more prevalent than consumption is a physician's prescription notepad. The initial thing you detect after your philosophical bewilderment is the odour. It's as though a chimney cleaner and a fragrance maker engaged in combat and chose to resolve it inside your nasal passages. Coal vapour lingers over everything. Residences, headwear, individuals, the monarch's Welsh corgis. You venture outside and discover the universe is rendered in perpetual dusk, courtesy of London's legendary pea soup fog. A variety of mist so dense you could carve it and present it on bread. Somewhere a passing pedestrian coughs with authentic Victorian theatricality, cloth pressed dramatically to mouth, while you struggle to position yourself in this Dickensian fever hallucination. Your dwelling is a monument to dark timber, decorative disorder, and a profound unspoken competition between grime and the cleaning servant. There are more lace doilies than you possess family members. Every horizontal surface bristles with containers, statuettes, memorial dishware, and peculiar delicate objects you're forbidden to handle. The wall covering, tinted a nauseating tone of arsenic emerald, is simultaneously the glory of your reception room and an actual wellness threat. But whatever's a little toxin among companions, you create a mental reminder not to taste the walls just to be safe. Outside on the avenue, circumstances are equally theatrical. Coaches rumble past, wheels clattering over paving stones, while avenue merchants peddle dubious pastries and even more dubious information. The metropolis is vibrant with motion and, honestly, on the brink of a communal mental catastrophe. It's not merely the labouring masses enduring through manufacturing shifts and slum squalor. Even the privileged class is wobbling, grasping at lace neckwear, nervously expecting the next telegram declaring someone else's catastrophic death from cerebral fever, feminine hysteria, or a dangerous breeze from the casement. You walk past a druggist's establishment, its windows shimmering with containers pledging to remedy everything from anxiety to wistfulness to the tragedy of an unfortunate bonnet. The atmosphere inside is thick with menthol and optimism. Women float in, expressions strained with expectation and undergarments. You catch fragments. My slumber, physician, it merely disappeared. I collapsed again at the notion of stewed sheep. Is it accurate the monarch herself consumes this? The apothecary, displaying a beard substantial enough to hide multiple tiny creatures, acknowledges knowingly and combines something brown, viscous, and extremely suspect. And yet, despite all the apprehension, there's a variety of hopefulness in the atmosphere, a feeling that with the proper treatment or a vigorous stroll in the gardens, dodging the exposed drainage, anything can be remedied. You glance up and observe advertisements for itinerant hypnotists, mineral spring treatments, and spiritualist presentations pledging to reach dearly departed family members who, truthfully, might be more fortunate inside your personal residence. The struggle against worry is continuous. Somebody is perpetually rearranging the porcelain, cleaning the chair covers, or silently critiquing your stance. Don't hunch, sweetheart. You'll contract a backbone ailment. You consume diluted tea, gaze into the intermediate space, and contemplate the catalogue of concerns you're expected to harbour. Deteriorating principles, contaminated liquid, spontaneous ignition, and the constantly present danger of your adjacent resident purchasing a superior coach. If you're a female, congratulations. You are minimally 12 times more probable to be identified with an ambiguous, terrifying-sounding disorder that demands repose, silence, and a modest glass of opium tincture at morning meal. If you're a male, you're obligated to suppress your sentiments until you detonate, preferably in a properly fitted garment at your gentleman's club. As the daylight struggles to penetrate through the haze, you comprehend something. Underneath the worry, the chill, and the relentless advance of questionable research, Victorian Britain is humming with existence. Chaotic, clamorous, partially deranged, and prepared to dose at a moment's warning. And so are you. Congratulations, you're formally part of the planet's most worried, medicated, and excessively ornamented civilization, and the morning has merely started. Your initial destination is the household doctor, a gentleman with a walrus moustache, suspect cleanliness, and an absolute conviction in the strength of anything that arrives in a brown container. If it's not functioning, simply add additional opium. He welcomes you with a gesture of his walking stick and a palm clasp that smells vaguely of disinfectant and yesterday's liquor. His chamber is a sanctuary to Victorian healthcare. Containers of cryptic powders occupy the platforms. Medical volumes are accumulated dangerously, and somewhere a worn copy of the medical journal is supporting a shaky limb of his workstation. Above everything, his facial whiskers command the chamber, spiraling in complex, waxed curves as if autonomously pursuing the remedy to deficiency disease. You position yourself into the universe's most uncomfortable seat, placing your feet modestly, as is appropriate for an individual whose framework is being delicately restructured by overstuffed animal hair. The physician examines you over his spectacles, then extracts a journal and commences his evaluation with all the discretion of a gentleman attempting to predict the champion at the equestrian competitions. What appears to be the difficulty today? Sleeplessness? Sadness? A hint of the fainting spells? He provides a compassionate, if distracted, acknowledgement as you relate your indications. It doesn't signify. The medication is identical. Victorian healthcare is less concerning identification and more concerning theatrical display. The physician makes a substantial demonstration of examining your heartbeat, by which he intends grasping your limb for precisely 3 moments, scowling, and then gazing contemplatively through the glass. He inquires if you've been consuming sufficient meat broth, if your intestines are functioning, if you've encountered any intense sentiments recently. Ideally, 0. Excessive stimulation can be lethal, he cautions, particularly if you're a female who recently observed a gentleman remove his headwear indoors. He retrieves his listening device, which appears like a wooden cylinder, and positions it somewhere approximately near your cardiac organ. He murmurs. He produces clicking sounds. He documents something indecipherable. Affirmative, he declares. It's precisely as I anticipated. Your bodily fluids are unbalanced and your nerve pathways are perilously strained. He appears solemnly satisfied, as though he's decoded the secret to human essence and additionally recalled the location of his eyeglasses. Treatment possibilities depend less on your indications and more on what's fashionable among his medical colleagues. bloodletting, perpetually an alternative. A vigorous stroll and some frigid liquid, water immersion if you're fortunate. But the genuine enchantment occurs with the introduction of the remedies. He searches through his medicine container and extracts a container with a marking that's partially Latin, partially optimistic thinking. Opium tincture, morphine, marijuana extract, codeine mixture. He arranges them like celebration tokens at the universe's most unfortunate social gathering. He clarifies that these compounds are completely harmless, entirely contemporary, and supported by every respectable participant of the Royal Medical Society, or minimally those who remain breathing. Adverse reactions? A hint of vertigo, maybe. Gentle bliss. Occasionally a predisposition to perform Shakespeare at inappropriate moments. He gestures knowingly. You're uncertain if he's jesting. Before you depart, he suggests a mustard compress for your torso, an inflammation agent for your extremities, and, just for precaution, a pleasant, peaceful recuperation in the rural area. Attempt not to contemplate too intensely, and definitely no fictional literature. With a concluding gesture, he documents your medication in penmanship so unintelligible it could function as an encoded communication to foreign operatives. You exit the chamber grasping a container of suspect treatments, and the persistent sensation that you have recently been attended by a gentleman who regards blood-sucking worms both companions and medical practitioners. Victorian healthcare, it's entirely assurance, whiskers, and optimism. Best wishes. Experiencing exhaustion, inundated. Attempting to manage with a spouse who reeks like preservation chemicals? Congratulations, you've been identified with nerve hysteria, feminine difficulties, or merely the fainting condition. The remedy is as cryptic as the identification. Your expedition commences with the elementary act of surviving as a Victorian female. If you are unwed, your alternatives are restricted to collapsing elegantly at social functions, patting at your temple with an embroidered cloth, and occasionally gazing longingly at a precipitation-marked window. If you are wed, congratulations, you have accessed an entire additional universe of worry, which physicians guarantee you is a logical result of completing your feminine obligations, such as nurturing offspring, accommodating visitors, and enduring another serving of stewed sheep. But let's proceed to the medical aspect of matters, where your indications, exhaustion, worry, excessive ambition, or merely a tendency to express your opinion are instantaneously grouped under the extensive classification of feminine problems. There is no grievance too insignificant or too ridiculous for an identification. If you weep during poetry performances, cannot slumber, detest your new wall covering, or experience philosophical despair every Tuesday, your disorder is immediately categorized as hysteria. Physicians, most of whom are confused by the feminine physiology but infinitely assured, acknowledge intelligently and create records. Hysteria, they state, is produced by everything from perusing fictional literature, excessive effort in needlework, surplus contemplation or inadequate contemplation. It's additionally attributed to restrictive undergarments, insufficient outdoor atmosphere, migrating uteruses, or merely the inherent fragility of the feminine makeup. The genuine origin? Irrelevant. The significant aspect is that you presently possess a validated condition. The intervention is an escapade in its personal capacity. You might be dispatched for a recuperation treatment, which entails reclining in a darkened chamber, prohibited from perusing, composing or conversing, supervised by a caretaker whose fundamental responsibility is to glare at you when you attempt to secretly glimpse at the publication. If you're unfortunate, you may be subjected to a program of frozen immersions, electrical jolts, or in severe instances, being prescribed vigorous equestrian activity. Nobody is certain if this is for the anxiety or simply the physician's entertainment, but for most, the solution is medication. Liberal spoonfuls of opium tincture or chloral mixture, delivered at every indication of sentiment. Experiencing a sensation. Portion. Pondering the cosmos. Double portion. Questioning why males never appear to be identified with hysteria. Consume the entire container. Your medication storage becomes a monument to Victorian drug science, supplied with sufficient opiates to make a contemporary druggist weep. Meanwhile, civilization anticipates you to execute your distress with elegance. Refined coughs are stylish, collapsing is virtually mandatory at gatherings, and a general atmosphere of ambiguous discomfort is the signature of a genuine woman. Companions and adjacent residents compete over whose anxiety is the most devastated, exchanging accounts about fainting at the theatre or developing cardiac flutters after an unexpected appearance from the mail carrier. You're prompted to maintain a record of your indications, primarily so subsequent generations can wonder at the theatrics. Every occasionally your physician suggests a novel intervention like an excursion to the coastal area, a glass of wine at morning meal, or an afternoon dedicated inhaling the vapours of combusting vegetation. And if you recuperate, well, wasn't that merely a bit too rapid? Questionable? Perhaps you require another recuperation. In Victorian Britain, the only aspect more hazardous than being a female with excessive sentiments was being a female with insufficient. Your complete survival is a refined equilibrium between apparent vulnerability and scarcely controlled disorder. And if you ever sense like objecting, the physician will attend you presently with another medication. Congratulations! You're a manual illustration. You're provided a modest glass container of opium tincture, dissolved opium in spirits, and informed it will remedy everything. Migraine, sleeplessness, philosophical despair. Consume a portion. Dental pain, consume 2. Absent spouse, perhaps he consumed excessive. The druggist displays the container with admiration, as though granting the sacred chalice. The marking is delightfully ambiguous for the alleviation of all nerve grievances and incorporates beneficial directions such as portion as necessary, up to absolute serenity. The golden liquid radiates threateningly in the gas illumination. You hesitate, contemplating if maybe a vigorous stroll or a heated immersion might assist alternatively. But your physician's directives are explicit. Opium tincture is the tomorrow, and the tomorrow is presently. You are not solitary in your newfound association with Victorian healthcare's preferred enchantment mixture. Everybody possesses a container concealed somewhere. Maternal figures, married women, unmarried women, the clergyman's spouse, the clergyman, even youngsters recuperating from a restless temperament. Opium tincture is dispensed for everything: migraines, stomach upset, melancholy, monthly discomfort, matrimonial dissatisfaction, joint inflammation, nerve pain, arthritis, inflammation, and a widespread sensation that existence is merely excessive. It's the multi-purpose implement of 19th century drugs. Consuming opium tincture is almost ritualistic. You uncork the container, distribute a few droplets into your tarnished silver utensil, and consume with the identical gravity reserved for sacred ritual. The flavour is acrid, a combination of medication storage and remorse. Within moments the universe appears gentler, quieter, as though somebody has courteously reduced reality. Your worries float away like mist on the river. This is presumably what monarch Victoria intended when she referenced sweet peace. She neglected to reference the parched mouth, but you can perpetually pursue it with tea or additional opium tincture. Before extended, you observe everybody surrounding you has cultivated a novel sensation of capability. Aunt Gwendolen, previously so timid she once collapsed at the utterance cabbage, is abruptly creating poetry and disputing philosophy with the mail carrier. Your companion, Mrs. Wainwright, has reorganised her sitting room 3 occasions this week and is presently crocheting a cap for her small bird. Your adjacent residents' youngsters, dosed abundantly to terminate their nerve agitation, dedicate entire afternoons performing nursery verses at the wall covering. Opium tincture brings the neighbourhood together. Tea gatherings metamorphose into dreamlike gatherings where the dialogue leaps from philosophy to absurdity. In the duration of a solitary baked good, you commence to perceive the attraction, What could be superior than a medication that not merely silences your anxiety, but renders your family members temporarily fascinating? But this wonder remedy is not without its peculiarities. For one aspect, the appropriate portion is a puzzle wrapped in speculation. Consume as required rapidly becomes consume as much as will accommodate in the utensil. Shortly, your interpretation of required broadens. Difficult morning portion, tedious supper portion, spouse returned late again. Double portion plus a modest glass for the canine. Peculiarly, you notice that everybody has become simultaneously more imaginative and, in the twilight hours, a bit more erratic. Communications are composed with wild, flowing penmanship. Journal recordings become theatrical in their sentimental magnitude, and your adjacent resident, Mrs. Fitch, is persuaded her furniture is possessed. The municipality grows more animated, or maybe just stranger. Ultimately, you commence to question the adverse reactions. You inquire the physician if it's typical to fantasize in vivid full color, or to dedicate an hour contemplating the internal existence of a bread product. He guarantees you that you're merely experiencing the complete advantages of contemporary research. More significantly, he states, you appear less worried. And that's everything that genuinely matters. Congratulations, you've uncovered the wonder of opium tincture. A remedy for everything, particularly tedium. And if you disregard your difficulties, your identity, or the location of the feline, well, that's simply research in operation. It doesn't require extended. Before you comprehend, this remedy has some astonishing consequences. Limitless vitality, profound philosophical revelations, and the compulsion to deliver speeches about the essence of table coverings. Your journal recordings are presently illegible, but extremely amusing. After merely a few weeks on your dispensed portion of opium tincture, the universe becomes a location of radiant capabilities and genuinely suspect choices. You discover yourself awakening at peculiar hours with an abrupt requirement to reorganize the flatware or perform Wordsworth to your container plant. Mornings commence with an animated internal dispute about the metaphysical consequences of citrus preserve. Your penmanship develops more elaborate and less decipherable. Purchasing catalogues are presently riddled with mysterious marginal annotations. Recall, investigate about the cost of invisible hand coverings. Seek counsel from the feline on the inquiry of fate. And your communications to family members demand a vocabulary reference. You are not solitary. Your social circle is becoming the absolute interpretation of animated ATT. The dialogue deviates from energized speculation about the hereafter. I suspect my aunt's sitting room seat contains the essence of a lesser Greek thinker to arrangements for ambitious residential projects. Your adjacent resident, once so practical, is abruptly resolved to decorate her reception chamber, fire gem and needlework motivational passages on every accessible cushion. She maintains it's for the welfare of her anxiety. The household is doubtful but frightened to dispute. Some mornings the adverse reactions are merely fanciful. You discover yourself absorbed by an pressing requirement to sequence the food storage or create a 17-stanza legendary about the sentimental expedition of a coat rack. You might compose a communication to your physician inquiring if it is typical to sense a connection with prickly mammals. Other mornings, it's obsession. Hours dedicated furiously cleaning the stairway barriers, followed by a vigorous protection of your selection to designate each individual spindle. The canine, previously a specimen of tolerance, presently conceals under the furniture whenever you approach with a novel presentation on the concealed symbolism of liquid food. At initially, household participants are cautiously encouraging. A bit surplus vitality, they calculate, is a modest cost to compensate for alleviation from the all-absorbing fainting spells. But shortly, your eruptions of imagination commence to concern them. Your spouse awakens in the darkness to the noise of your rapid succession piano improvisations, a composition you designate tribute to the mystical condiment container. The youngsters, dosed with their personal remedy for anxiety, have initiated constructing proportional representations of the exhibition structure out of food tins and cord. The consequences extend beyond your residence. At religious services, you astonish everybody by proposing to direct the singers in a rousing, completely original sacred song about repairing hosiery in the bread establishment. You cultivate a passionate discussion with the bread maker about the ethical obligation of bread. The neighbourhood clergyman, previously unshakable, silently arranges more regular residential appearances simply to monitor. Sometimes, however, there is a darkness aspect to all this exuberance. There are mornings when your contemplations accelerate too rapidly, when concepts overcrowd each other and your extremities tremble as you struggle to needlework philosophical inquiries onto your sleeping garment. Slumber develops elusive. You remain conscious, creating poetry by gas illumination or strategizing the perfect configuration of every seat in the residence. The barriers constrict, decorated with the results of yesterday's wall-covering passion. Still, nobody dares reference the expression dependence. It is inconceivable that something so completely contemporary and extensively acclaimed could possess a disadvantage. If the physician dispenses it, it must be beneficial. If the monarch herself sanctions, who are you to challenge it? Congratulations. You have accessed the high-intensity stage of Victorian self-advancement, where your anxiety is calmed, your intellect is accelerating, and your reception chamber is presently the shade of philosophical hopefulness. And tomorrow you might decorate it again. You shuffle into the neighbourhood apothecary, platforms groan under the mass of containers, pledging to remedy anything from melancholy to anxiety. Every treatment contains a shocking quantity of spirits, mercury, or something that illuminates in the darkness. The establishment bell chimes overhead as you venture into an olfactory bombardment of menthol, flax oil, and the vague but unmistakable essence of optimism. The druggist welcomes you from behind the surface, modifying his eyeglasses, beard as complete and unkempt as a vegetation barrier in spring. You glance around. Every square measurement of the location is compressed. Substantial azure glass containers shimmer on elevated platforms. Sequences of marked compartments boast cryptic contents. Dragon's fluid, pulverized skull covering, essence of bliss. And underneath the surface rests a timber container whose solitary key is maintained on a chain adjacent to the druggist's cardiac organ. The selection of remedies is less rational, more spiritual expedition. There is a mixture for anxiety, a liquid for melancholy, a remedy for organ irritation, and powders for anything that might afflict the human essence. Some combinations pledge to make you slumber, others promise to awaken you, or conceivably simultaneously. The solitary aspect they possess in similarity, they're distributed with a gesture and the guarantee that all the finest households utilize this. You approach the surface, grasping your physician's medication, a monument of indecipherable penmanship and informal hopefulness. The druggist scarcely glances at it before initiating into operation. He chooses a container at arbitrary, provides it an agitation. The liquid inside fizzes threateningly and continues to incorporate a few pinches of something dusty and a liberal splash of spirits. He concludes it with a branch of something emerald, maybe for wellness, maybe for decoration. You'll desire to consume this with nourishment, he advises solemnly, or on a vacant digestive organ if you desire for accelerated outcomes. You acknowledge, not completely certain which of your difficulties you're expected to resolve initially. Is it the melancholy, the migraine, or the advancing suspicion that your furniture is murmuring? As you anticipate, a procession of patrons arrives and departs. A fatigued maternal figure solicits a liquid to tranquilize her infant's darkness terrors. Translation for dental discomfort. The neighbourhood clergyman retrieves a container of strengthening spirits, declaring it's for the bell operator. A gentleman in an elevated hat desires something inconspicuous for digestive abnormality. The druggist acknowledges, distributes, and occasionally provides counsel that resonates suspiciously like a formula for beverage. Some of the mixtures are traditional. There's Godfrey's mixture, opium and molasses, Mrs. Winslow's calming liquid for infants with sufficient morphine to collapse an equine, and a cryptic treatment marked Dr. Grimble's electric mixture, which illuminates vaguely in the darkness and may or may not possess genuine electricity in it. Mercury tablets are still in style, though their consequences are primarily restricted to spectacular dental depletion and eruptions of passion. For the more contemporary-oriented, there's Vin Mariani, a French wine infused with cocaine, adored by the Pope and anybody requiring to redesign the residence in a solitary afternoon. The platform is additionally supplied with licensed medications that pledge to eliminate all feminine grievances, revitalise the circulation, or, if nothing alternative, provide a temporary and brilliant escape from the actualities of Victorian drainage. You depart the drugstore burdened with containers, bundles, powders, and conceivably a novel perspective on existence, or minimally a provisional sensation of invulnerability. The directions apportion as required, disregard the cautions, and above everything, don't inquire what's genuinely inside. Welcome to the Victorian drugstore, where the remedy for your difficulties might be merely a consumption away, and the adverse reactions are merely a concern for tomorrow. In a universe filled with mystery treatments, ambiguity is partially the enjoyment. Shortly you observe everybody in your social circle transports their personal special container, concealed in their small purse or up a decorated sleeve. Dependence isn't disgraceful, it's virtually a pastime. At initially it's discreet. A companion pats her mouth with a perfumed cloth, then inconspicuously consumes from a miniature glass container before returning to her needlework. The clergyman's spouse cultivates an abrupt fascination with peppermint droplets, except the droplets are 40% opium by measurement. Even the household canine appears more calm these mornings, thanks to a suspiciously enthusiastic animal doctor and calming liquid delivered at the smallest indication of canine worry. The peculiar aspect about Victorian drug consumption is precisely how routine it becomes. Opium tincture and its companions are not confined to dark spaces or murmured speculations. They are celebrated, suggested, and most of everything, distributed. Youngsters are dispatched to the druggist to retrieve additional medication for maternal figure and arrive home with containers in brown wrapping, humming nursery melodies and pausing to inhale the contents for positive fortune. Social occasions acquire a novel vitality. Afternoon tea is abruptly less concerning the Earl Grey and more concerning who's incorporated what to their vessel. Mrs. Stroud, typically the specimen of propriety, dedicates half the gathering clarifying her novel hypothesis about the psychic characteristics of rhubarb. Somebody perpetually possesses a cold, a migraine, or an ambiguous instance of the instability. Miraculously, there's perpetually a treatment at disposal. Containers are transferred with the identical informal closeness as rumour. Attempt this, sweetheart. It accomplished marvels for my spouse's back pain. Additionally, his sensation of amusement. You rapidly comprehend that dependence in this epoch arrives dressed as sophistication. The containers themselves are creations of craft. Carved crystal, delicately marked, crowned with elaborate closures. Accumulating them becomes a signature of cultivation. Nothing communicates refined like a platform aligned with apothecary glass and diminished licensed medication advertisements. Even the rules of etiquette govern how you consume these things. You never drink straight from the bottle, always pour it out carefully, and you certainly never confess that you drained the whole vial before dinner. There's a pecking order to the whole routine. The upper crust insists on nerve remedies shipped in from France or Switzerland, preferably something with a hint of cocaine for that European sophistication. Everyone else settles for whatever the neighbourhood druggist can whip up, sometimes doctored with a splash of wine or a sugar lump to cut the harsh taste. Whatever the origin, everybody's chasing that same sensation, tranquil, controlled, and just disconnected enough to survive another night of polite Victorian chit-chat. Nobody's hiding the dependency. It's more of a shared secret, the setup to 1,000 courteous quips. Oh, Mrs. Pendleton, always so lively, must be that new tonic of hers. The word addict never comes up. Instead, women are fragile, men are exhausted, and kids are just high-spirited. Even doctors are playing along, writing new prescriptions as freely as candy shop owners distribute mints. Sure, there are red flags, short fuses, forgotten meetings, an abrupt desire to redo the entire house in shades of demented purple. But these get dismissed as personality traits, not warning signs. If someone vanishes for a couple days, everyone assumes they're at the spa or nursing their frayed nerves. Nobody stages an intervention, just offers sympathy and maybe suggests a vacation. Within your first month, you've got your go-to mixture, your favourite container, and a well-practiced explanation for why you need it. You blend right in perfectly. In Victorian England, dependency isn't seen as weakness, but as a stylish hobby, an accessory that goes with any outfit, and a secret everybody shares. Congratulations! You're not just medicating yourself, you're in the inner circle. Why does nearly every home have a fainting sofa? Because half the population is either recovering from an opium high or dealing with the soul-crushing dread of an ordinary weekday. Furniture dealers are making a fortune. Every proper Victorian living room has one. A low, sweeping lounger covered in velvet, brocade, or whatever material best approximates a narcotic fantasy. The fainting sofa is the focal point, the icebreaker, and the designated crash zone for anyone overwhelmed by anxiety, scandal, or the lingering effects of too much elixir. It's like interior decorators all agreed we need something elegant for people to drop onto, ideally somewhere with excellent echo for dramatic size. To maintain melodramatic standards, you're supposed to use the fainting sofa constantly, especially when others can see. Social conventions demand that whenever you feel dizzy, which happens frequently given your current medication regimen, you must drift toward the sofa, position yourself in an aesthetically limp arrangement, and wait for someone to rush over. Extra credit if you can press a lace handkerchief to your brow while whispering something about the temperature, the decor, or the inexplicable melancholy of silverware. If you're hosting, your fainting sofa needs to be placed for optimal viewing, preferably within earshot of both the piano and the tea station so you never miss gossip or a fresh brew of Earl Grey. Guests take turns sprawling across the sofa, swapping complaints and trading advice about the finest remedies for emotional blockage. Nobody actually questions what's in the medicine vial, they just trust it complements the cookies. Having a fainting sofa in every household isn't merely about aesthetics, it's a medical requirement. Victorian physicians regularly prescribe substances that turn the simple act of standing too fast into a dangerous gamble. 1 second you're lecturing about the virtues of boiled meat, the next you're seeing double. The room tilts and physics wins. Your companions murmur understanding words and produce smelling salts, which contain just enough ammonia to make you reconsider every decision you've ever made. Fainting is more than a physical response. It's essentially a social ceremony. A well-executed collapse can terminate an uncomfortable discussion, win you praise, or even excuse you from an unexpected poetry session. There's genuine skill to the swoon. Too understated and you lose your chance. Too theatrical and someone might summon the physician who will definitely prescribe more laudanum and recommend a trip, maybe as far as Bath. Kids catch on early. Young girls practice their collapsing moves in the classroom. Teenage boys fake faints during church to dodge sermons. Even the household dog has learned that flopping dramatically on the chaise guarantees attention and, on lucky days, a spoonful of calming syrup. Naturally, there are consequences. Too much swooning and you risk becoming permanent furniture, impossible to distinguish from the other overstuffed pieces. Visitors sometimes forget you're conscious and prop a tea tray on your ankles. Still, it beats sitting straight-backed and pretending to care about Colonel Weatherby's tale of the great umbrella crisis of '68. By nightfall, the fainting sofa is the hottest seat in the place. If it could speak, it would share countless stories of hushed confessions, impromptu verses, midnight giggles, and the silent rivalry to see who can collapse with the greatest style. Congratulations! You're living through a golden era of comfort, pharmaceuticals and public demonstrations of delicacy. The fainting sofa isn't merely furniture, it's an entire lifestyle. Collapse away. It's not only you. The ladies at your weekly tea gathering are laughing hysterically, quoting Byron and debating fiercely about the deeper meaning of marmalade. Nobody recalls how the topic began or why the cat is dressed in a bonnet. Tea gatherings in Victorian England aren't the calm porcelain tinkling events you'd imagine. They're wild, spinning festivals of feeling, minor pandemonium and barely concealed pharmaceutical sampling. The table sags beneath cakes, rolls, little sandwiches and no fewer than 4 varieties of medicinal cordial, all shared with an air of knowing delight. You settle in, already expecting the afternoon's blend of polished manners and gentle madness. As the tea pours, so do the remedies. Bottles emerge from purses and are quietly stirred into teacups below the tabletop. Just a splash, darling. It works miracles for dialogue, Mrs. Pomeroy promises. Her eyes slightly too gleaming, her giggles arriving in bursts. There are hushed arguments about which tincture matches best with Battenberg cake, and an ongoing gag about how nobody really knows the marmalade's origins, or who keeps topping it off. Soon enough, the atmosphere transforms from gentle gossip to ecstatic revelation. Someone launches into verse about the heartbreaking romance of a teapot. Another woman begins an analysis of the political meaning of scones, which quickly dissolves into laughter as Mrs. Ashbury, typically so refined, swears her pastry is glaring at her with disapproval. Even the family cat participates, appearing from behind the couch in an ensemble, suggesting he's trying out for a Victorian drama. The magic of the Victorian tea party is its accepting spirit. Nobody criticises you for losing track of a thought or delivering a monologue about the comparative smarts of hedgehogs. Memory lapses are merely symptoms of imaginative thinking. If a guest blanks on her own identity or starts reciting times tables incorrectly, it's attributed to anxiety, inspiration, or possibly the special botanical mixture from the neighbourhood pharmacist. If Claude runs into any of these situations or other harmful uses, Claude refuses to assist. Subjects ping wildly across the table. One moment you're analysing the Queen's newest hairstyle, the next you're deep into a passionate argument about whether spirits prefer a particular type of preserve. Mrs. Hargreaves, always armed with a fresh hypothesis, insists her uncle once spotted a ghost in the pantry, though only after sampling the remedy for nerve pain. The circle nods sagely, each privately considering whether their own storage areas might harbour similar phantoms. Without fail, someone makes a theatrical retreat to the fainting sofa after laughing too intensely at an especially ridiculous wordplay. She's revived with smelling salts and another modest glass of medicinal wine because in Victorian England, recovery invariably includes more of whatever triggered the collapse. This is, don't forget, an age that believes the cure for every problem is either rest or a second portion. The laughter stretches well into the afternoon. Cups clatter, dishes shake, and a cake is formally deemed too existential to consume. By the end, nobody's entirely certain what was covered, who prevailed in the marmalade dispute, or why the drapes have been knotted into what looks disturbingly like a hangman's noose. But everyone concurs it was an absolutely stimulating occasion, one to repeat just as soon as somebody remembers which house they're actually in. Congratulations! You've weathered a Victorian tea party, a tempest of sugar, stimulants and absurd exchanges. Don't leave your bottle behind, and if you locate the cat's headwear, kindly return it to the piano. The following party will be even more animated. Bedtime involves arranging the medicine bottles on your nightstand, pouring out your dosage by candlelight and praying you don't confuse the sleep draft with the hair treatment. The upside, you'll likely sleep. The downside, it could be for multiple days. As twilight arrives and the coal fires are dampened for the night, the household enters ritual territory. Sleep in Victorian England is a formidable opponent, a creature to be controlled with discipline, conviction and a generous dose of chemistry. You walk into your bedroom greeted by the familiar clutter of belongings, a silver grooming set, a pile of dog-eared novels, and naturally, a small arsenal of bottles, vials and cryptic containers. If a contemporary pharmacist stumbled in, they'd experience cardiac distress at the sight. You start with the fundamentals. There's the laudanum for anxiety, a measure of chloral hydrate for profound rest, and for those with restless limbs, a remedy so potent it's said to pacify livestock. Each container displays a label written in beautiful, barely readable handwriting. Calming drops to be used when necessary, mild sedative not exceeding 3 doses or 4 if distressed, and Mrs. Hargreaves' famous sleep cordial, guaranteed to function. Sooner or later, measuring the portions is a fragile operation. The flame of the bedside candle wobbles precariously as you peer at the liquid level in your miniature glass. You make an internal promise to yourself tonight, no more than 3 drops of anything, and absolutely nothing Aunt Maud abandoned here last Christmas. The recollection of last week's mishap when you mistakenly dosed yourself with muscle rub and dreamed you were speaking fluent Portuguese still haunts you as you mix your nightly blend. You detect similar preparations in the rooms underneath, the far-off clinking of glass, a cough, the exhale of someone settling into bed with a bottle of nightcap spirits. The staff aren't exempt. The cook depends on her camphorated wine, the butler his digestive brandy, and even the dog gets a spoonful of tranquilizing syrup lest his dreams grow too intense. Bedtime becomes a communal affair. Family members wander between chambers swapping tips on the optimal mixture of potions. Your cousin maintains that combining the purple drops with a taste of sloe gin induces the most rejuvenating sleep. Grandmother insists her rest improved enormously after adding a teaspoon of port to her elixir, though she hasn't risen before midday in weeks. Once tucked into bed, the effects start their slow, unavoidable progression. First arrives the feeling of mild separation, as if the mattress has sprouted wings and you're floating down the Thames, past all the day's anxieties and most of your recent memory. You attempt to read, but the text dances on the page, twirling in a hazy performance of incomplete ideas. The candle sputters. You shut your eyes. Dreams arrive intense and illogical. One evening you're dining with the Queen. The next, you're debating with a vegetable about existence. Sometimes you wake uncertain of where or who you are. Wasn't this cushion blue yesterday? And whose footwear is that near the window? If you do wake during the night, the answer is clear. Another dose, a sip of spirits, maybe a quick prayer for undisturbed sleep. In the Victorian age, sleeplessness isn't a challenge, it's a business prospect. Congratulations, you've navigated the bedtime obstacle course, sliding smoothly into chemically supported unconsciousness. Rest peacefully, just not excessively. Tomorrow arrives soon and your bottles will be there waiting. Your husband, growing more baffled, struggles to track your shifting temperament. Is it the medicine, the lunar cycle, or are you simply tired of his stories about the Crimean War? Welcome to the distinctly Victorian challenge of the respectable English gentleman married to a woman whose character, once as reliable as his morning fish, now oscillates between poetic raptures and spontaneous fainting episodes, frequently within the same 60 minutes. He recalls a period when your biggest quirk was hoarding teaspoons. Now he creeps through the house terrified of disrupting your latest speech on the spiritual significance of asparagus. The issue, from his perspective, is that the scientific age has unleashed an avalanche of treatments, tonics, and solutions for the female system. These bottles, vials, and powders have become your dearest companions. He's observed that your daily schedule includes tea, tonic, a rest, a theatrical sigh on the fainting couch, another tonic, some piano playing, a brief existential meltdown, and possibly a final tonic for good measure. Even the cat appears to have been affected, displaying a somewhat glazed expression after licking a stray droplet of Mrs. Pennington's universal elixir. Men in this period are told to maintain composure, but recently your husband's is starting to quiver. At the club, he murmurs nervously to other married men about your newfound passion for midnight curtain speeches and the random unprovoked waltz around the dining table. Is it the laudanum, he wonders, or just the natural order? His companions nod with the solemn gravity of those who've witnessed too much. Each presents their own hypothesis. Perhaps you require a change of environment. Perhaps you should pursue archery. Or perhaps it's time for a bracing ocean journey. One direction if needed. The medical establishment offers no assistance. The family physician, proud of his walrus moustache and vague diagnoses, reassures your husband that everything is completely normal. Just a hint of nerves, my good fellow. Give her this. He passes over a bottle with a label so worn it might as well read, "Take your chances." If anything, the doctor appears more fascinated by the case than worried, scribbling notes for his upcoming paper on erratic female hysteria and the function of tinctures in domestic harmony. Naturally, your husband tries his own strategies. He reads aloud from the newspaper, hoping the currency rates or parliamentary discussions will return you to your previous stability. You reply by asking the sofa its thoughts on the grain tariffs. He proposes a peaceful walk in the park. You bring the neighbour's goose along for companionship. He suggests more wholesome pursuits like charity work or flower arrangement. You, motivated by your latest restorative, volunteer to host a séance in the basement. Every now and then, he questions his own mental state. Is this simply matrimony? Or has his beloved become an alchemical disaster? He consults the butler, the cook, and even the gardener, all of whom are unbothered. It's the era, sir. They claim everyone's somewhat peculiar. He thinks about seeking counsel from the vicar, but after watching the vicar's wife try to converse with the wallpaper, he abandons that idea. Ultimately, your husband learns to adjust. He develops an appreciation for evening walks by himself. He becomes proficient at avoiding impromptu poetry performances and grows to value the fainting couch as a sanctuary, if not for you, then for his own shredded nerves. Congratulations. In Victorian England, the gentleman's puzzle isn't understanding women, it's keeping pace with them. One tonic at a stretch. It's 2 a.m. The only thing louder than your inventive variations on greensleeves is your spontaneous tirade about the oppressive nature of corsets. Victorian walls are paper thin, and so is everyone's tolerance. Somewhere in the murky depths of laudanum-inspired creativity, you've concluded that sleep is for the uninspired. The piano, neglected for months, except during obligatory family performances, now calls like a beacon in the haze of your nightly habits. You slip onto the bench, candle wavering, and let your fingers skip across the keys in what can only be called a spontaneous concerto. Half Chopin, half feline treading on a harpsichord. The household responds in phases. Initially there's disbelief. Maybe it's just the breeze or an unusually musical rodent. But as your composition intensifies and grows more adventurous, now including the lid of the cookie tin and some vigorous foot percussion, the servants rouse. The dog, who has long abandoned caring about your oddities, tunnels deeper beneath the fainting couch. Your husband, dreaming of peaceful Swiss waters, shoots upright, certain there's a brass band in the hallway. By the third stanza of your freshly composed nocturne for anxiety and discordant bass notes, the neighbours are fully conscious. Victorian houses, constructed for elegance but not for sound isolation, are infamous for magnifying both secrets and serenades. Mrs. Giles next door, who takes pride in never missing a parish whisper, listens with mixed horror and intrigue as you transition into a passionate improvisation titled Ode to the Tyranny of Aprons. The milkman, making his pre-dawn route, pauses outside your window, quietly noting avoid residence number 14 before dawn on his mental checklist. You are, at this stage, completely enjoying yourself. Each fresh melody is a revolt against the suffocating discipline of daytime hours. The piano becomes your confessor, your war cry, your faithful companion. In a world intent on keeping women's voices tiny and their emotions tidy, you pause intermittently to sip your soothing cordial, guaranteed by your physician to encourage relaxation, though the label doesn't clarify for whom. Sometimes you cease playing and begin philosophical silent reflections delivered in a stage whisper to your imagined listeners. Last evening it was the ethics of rhubarb preserve. Tonight, the fundamental unfairness of corset stays. Picture, you declare dramatically, a world where we're free to inhale, to shift, to select our own sleeping hour. From somewhere overhead, a neighbour pounds on the floor. Whether in solidarity or objection, you're unsure. Eventually, someone tries negotiation. A servant materialises at the doorway with a gentle proposal that perhaps you might attempt playing something softer. You acknowledge, then instantly begin a thundering finale. Artistic principle respects no curfew. By daybreak you're exhausted, collapsed over the keys, satisfied in knowing you've expressed yourself fully. The neighbourhood, less thrilled, starts its day with swollen eyes, unexplained headaches, and a renewed appreciation for quiet. Over breakfast, you catch whispers. Did you hear her last night? But there's a reluctant respect. Not everyone can transform Rule Britannia into a 12-minute improvisational fugue featuring the washboard and the neighbour's irritated cat. Congratulations! You've delivered art, vitality, and mild sleep deprivation to your street. In Victorian England, the night belongs to you. The piano is your platform and the neighbours will heal eventually, or they'll purchase heavier drapes. Either way, you're creating history, one nocturne at a stretch. Somehow society persuades itself that all of this is entirely acceptable. After all, the Queen herself uses special drops for her anxiety. If it's suitable for royalty, it's suitable for your neighbour's 10-year-old. It's an odd historical moment when public wellness and private indulgence stroll arm in arm down the avenue, corseted, fastened, and utterly confident in their own virtue. Laudanum, morphine, bromide, and patent nerve remedies aren't merely accepted. They're praised as symbols of modern morality. There are promotions in the paper, endorsements from upstanding citizens, and even magazine features dedicated to selecting the proper cordial for your temperament. Every parlour stocks at least 3 bottles, one quietly marked for nerves, another for rest, and a third for crises that can emerge any time, typically before breakfast. In this climate, the line between respectable and reckless blurs so completely that nobody dares challenge it. A woman who refuses tonics is viewed with mistrust. She must be concealing something, whispers Mrs. Frobisher as she stirs a double portion into her tea. Or worse, she has nothing to be anxious about. Abnormal. Children are medicated for squirming, husbands for exhaustion, grandmothers for the blues, and nobody gets overlooked. Even the maid receives a tonic if she appears too content. Equal access medication is, after all, the pinnacle of civilization. Moralists in the pulpit rage against excess. Mainly gin, sometimes gambling, but never the family bottle of laudanum. The reasoning goes that a substance, when prescribed, endorsed and sold by men in formal coats, cannot conceivably be immoral. Temperance groups fight vigorously against public intoxication, but carve out an exception for Mrs. Merton's strengthening drops, even as she informs the butcher the meat is singing to her again. This isn't vice, this is advancement. Pharmaceutical companies are more than pleased to strengthen the narrative. Every box of pills bears a guarantee of moral enhancement, brings serenity and Christian propriety to the household, announces the newest advertisement for Mellow's medicated elixir, endorsed by clergy and 2 of 3 earls. If a wealthy lady seems slightly frantic at the garden party, she's praised for her energy. If she faints in the bushes, it's blamed on the crushing weight of modern virtue. The Queen herself, distant but ever present, serves as both trendsetter and warning story. Her alleged use of special drops comforts the public and conveniently explains any royal peculiarities. If Her Majesty requires a nightly cordial, so do the common people. Consequently, entire families assemble in the evening to consume their prescribed virtue in a bottle, raising glasses to another day, survived in good humour and with just enough mania to keep things engaging. Beneath everything, the moral framework of the era stands on pure denial and smart marketing. The symptoms of overuse, agitation, feverish imagination, unexpected crying, the impulse to recite Tennyson at dinner, aren't viewed as side effects, but as evidence that you possess depth of emotion and spiritual sophistication. A proper Victorian never confesses to dependency, only to being profoundly moved by the world's suffering. Congratulations. You're existing in a society where mania proves moral character, where chemistry equals personality, and where a small bottle beside the bed is the ultimate symbol of respectability. In this world, virtue and vice taste strikingly similar and arrive with a convenient measuring spoon. Children receive the identical tonics as adults, sometimes in reduced amounts, sometimes not. Little Percy is presently reciting Shakespeare and trying to scale the wallpaper. If you believed the Victorian stance on medicine was questionable for adults, wait until you witness the children's regimen. Here, the phrase childproof means absolutely nothing. Bottles of soothing syrup, nerve tonic and cordial sit within convenient reach, frequently right beside the candy, the sewing basket and the family Bible. Any child with a runny nose, a temper tantrum, or excessive liveliness is quickly given a spoonful of whatever mixture mother or nurse finds most practical, or, when that fails, whatever sits closest at hand. The runaway favourite, Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, available everywhere from drugstores to general stores, celebrated for its sugary flavour and gentle capacity to make children both compliant and helpfully unconscious. The secret ingredient, a combination of morphine, alcohol and sufficient sugar to energize an entire hive. Advertisements enthusiastically claim children cry for it, which serves as both advertisement and caution. Additional remedies fill the nursery shelf. Godfrey's cordial, Dalby's carminative and an unending stream of cough medicines, sleeping drops and quieting powders all compete for space. If it displays a decorative Victorian label and claims to pacify the young ones, it's likely loaded with more narcotics than a contemporary pharmacy would dare keep unlocked. Measuring is an artistic judgment determined less by weight or age than by temperament, gut feeling and whether mother has already consumed her afternoon tonic. The results are striking. At playdates, children swing between explosions of wild imagination and abrupt, mysterious naps. Hide and seek sometimes concludes when someone dozes off in the coal bin. The household runs quieter, but only because half the inhabitants are touring dreamland on a chemical voyage. When conscious, young Victorians possess the literary vigour of a caffeinated poet, writing rhymes, staging naval conflicts, and reciting passages of the King James Bible in tones that would alarm an exorcist. If there's a negative aspect to all this premature self-medication, nobody brings it up. Actually, a strong tolerance for patent medicines is viewed as evidence of good upbringing. Grandparents brag about their childhood dosages. We thrived on a teaspoon of laudanum and shoe polish every morning. And mothers compete over who has the most peaceful, drowsiest child. Teachers appreciate it. Classroom management is simpler when pupils are too groggy to cause trouble. The sole disadvantage? A marginally elevated rate of students sleepwalking through arithmetic lessons or crying softly at the appearance of a chalkboard. Children, being both flexible and perceptive, figure out how to exploit the arrangement. A strategically timed sniffle can secure an additional dose of the tasty stuff. Some attempt to negotiate with siblings, exchanging chores for sips of the more flavourful medicines. Others go independent, stealing samples when adults look away. It's fairly routine to discover young Percy balanced on a chair in the pantry, eyeing the syrup bottle like a pirate hunting for treasure. Obviously, mishaps occur. A bottle tips over, a dose gets doubled, a particularly bold child tries to create his own treatment for imaginary conditions. The outcome? A panicked summons for the doctor, who prescribes what else? More of the identical stuff, but with a caution to give only when required, and not before supper. In Victorian England, childhood is a chemical trial supervised by devoted adults with complete confidence in the strength of modern medicine. No child-resistant caps, no caution labels, no anxiety, Just a cabinet packed with vibrant bottles and the expectation that everyone wakes in time for dinner. Congratulations, you're nurturing the future generation of poets, visionaries and amateur chemists. Sleep soundly, little ones, just as soon as your tonic takes hold. When the pharmacy sells out, there's always the neighbourhood opium den, a hazy room crowded with poets, card players, and at least one woman from the church choir. It's less sinful hideout, more reading circle, except everyone's reclining. You catch rumours of the location from friends and family, typically after the third cup of tea or second glass of medicinal sherry. Naturally, one never goes, your aunt mentions, glancing pointedly at the piano. But if one happened to, strictly from curiosity, naturally, it would be quite enlightening. In truth, everyone seems to know somebody who inadvertently spent the afternoon there, leaving dreamy-eyed and saturated with incense, convinced they'd discovered the secret to contentment, or at bare minimum, the storyline of the next thrilling penny dreadful. You're standing outside an unmarked door in a foggy back alley, pulse quickening just a touch. The only marker is a painted red lantern, swaying softly in the mist. Step inside and you're hit with thick, sweet smoke, layered rugs underfoot, and the delicate chime of porcelain pipes touching lips. Voices drift between English, French, maybe Sanskrit, or perhaps just someone struggling to recall what they named their own hat. The crowd is wonderfully mixed. Office workers, restless aristocrats, anxious poets, and a remarkable number of middle-aged women sporting magnificent bonnets. Everyone mingles without the usual social ladder. In here, you're no one, and everyone all at once. Shoes aren't required, laughter comes easy, and the only pressing engagement is your next pull from the pipe. The den's owner, an enigmatic presence known simply as Mr. Ling, glides through the haze without a sound, offering wisdom, matches, and the odd philosophical puzzle. "Smoke and you'll glimpse what's concealed," he murmurs, as though you haven't already spent your day drowning in visions courtesy of your latest medicine. You sink into a worn velvet cushion, gazing up as smoke coils toward the ceiling, transforming gaslight into constellations. A young poet, maybe Percy, maybe Charlotte, announces they can hear colours now. The woman from the church choir recites scripture, then explodes into giggles at some private joke. In the corner, someone's drafting the longest letter ever addressed to Queen Victoria, mostly doodles and scattered Shakespeare lines. The mood is peaceful, reflective, and touched with something almost enchanted. You briefly think about organising a book club. Everyone here seems brimming with thoughts, yet no desire whatsoever to debate them. Beyond these walls, the world is rigid and harsh. Inside, nothing's off limits except taking yourself seriously. Tea flows endlessly, sometimes paired with biscuits, sometimes with tales. Someone strums a sitar nearby, or maybe that's just wind whistling through the pipes. Every now and then a jittery newcomer wonders aloud if this is risky, immoral, or destined for tomorrow's scandal sheet. The regulars brush off such worries. Dangerous is challenging Mrs. Harper about her scone technique. Someone mumbles, "This is just Tuesday." Besides, everyone maintains it's not genuine addiction. Not when you're propped on a cushion quoting Milton. When you finally step back outside, reality feels gentler, hazier, less demanding. The alley appears less threatening, the air somehow sweeter. You might not retain every conversation, but you definitely remember feeling, however briefly, completely at peace. Congratulations. You found the Victorian opium den. Not some den of corruption, but a sanctuary for the over-medicated. And the vaguely poetic, just another method of getting by lying down, dreamy and happily sheltered from the rain. Feeling slightly unwell? Time for a spring refresh. Cleanse? Just pile on more opium, a touch of mercury, and maybe a gentle bloodletting to keep things balanced. Victorians are nothing if not committed to self-improvement through ordeal, and nowhere does this shine brighter than in their wellness detox approach. Mention to your physician that you're feeling sluggish, out of balance, or simply weary of staring at the wallpaper, and you'll find yourself enrolled in a comprehensive program of restorative suffering. Detox Victorian edition is less green juice and stretching, more survive several dubious medical procedures and claim it as personal triumph. The opening phase typically involves a purge, meant to flush out mysterious toxins your doctor swears are behind every modern complaint. The prescription is equally forceful and unsettling. Begin with a robust dose of castor oil or rhubarb root, guaranteed to get your bowels moving. Nobody's quite sure what exits, but everyone agrees you feel emptier afterwards, mainly because you're too drained to move. Next arrives the bloodletting, a quick appointment with your neighbourhood barber surgeon. Yes, he handles haircuts too, and here you are reclined with a basin beneath your arm, waiting to lose a pint or two of corrupted blood. He promises all the finest families do this, particularly in springtime, when the humours grow especially troublesome. The real question is whether you'll pass out before or after he applies the leeches. If you do collapse, congratulations. That's viewed as encouraging. Extra credit if you manage it elegantly upon the fainting couch. But purification isn't solely about blood loss, it's about gaining clarity. Following a recuperative rest, you're urged to start a regimen of tonic tablets, a cocktail of mercury, antimony, and if you're particularly desperate, arsenic. A bit of poison strengthens the system, declares the family doctor, peering at you over gold-rimmed glasses. You accept his assessment because by this point you're too dizzy to protest. Naturally, no cleanse would be finished without the crowning touch: more opium. Laudanum gets added generously to everything: tea, lemonade, milk, bath water, guaranteeing that even while your body protests, your mind stays blissfully detached. By day 2, you're simultaneously purified and slightly unmoored from normal time. The household debates whether you're falling ill or beginning a mystical quest. The cat, recognizing an opening, claims your spot on the fainting couch. Even meals play into this relentless quest for absolute purity. Broths get boiled until they resemble cloudy water, bread is deliberately staled twice for digestive calm, and the only permitted seasoning is a dash of righteousness. You crave a forbidden apple, or at minimum, tea without pharmaceutical additives. Meanwhile, friends send encouraging notes alongside recipes for superior pickled onions to promote humoral balance. By week's end, you emerge from detox fundamentally altered. Your complexion is paler, your garments hang looser, and your perspective on Victorian healthcare now carries existential doubt. Yet everyone assures you, doctor, relatives, even the mailman, that you appear cleansed, which in Victorian terms means vaguely spectral but courteous. Congratulations, you've conquered the grand Victorian cleanse, where wellness means increased medication, decreased nutrition, and newfound appreciation for modern supplements. Time to commemorate with a restorative measure of laudanum. When supplies dwindle or your physician decides you've had sufficient, anticipate a week of perspiration, visions, and insisting the lamp harbours malicious intent. Victorian England, so adept at fostering dependencies, proves remarkably ill-equipped for the consequences. There's no 12-step recovery, no useful pamphlet titled "So You've Run Out of Laudanum." There's only the soul's dark passage, a 7-day trial spent trembling beneath excessive quilts, gripping a chamber pot and staring at the floral wallpaper until it seems to shift. It begins with subtle discomfort. You awaken to discover your medicine cabinet distressingly bare, your hidden bottles arranged like miniature glass gravestones. Terror settles in. You plead with the housemaid to rush to the chemist, but she returns unsuccessful. Inventory problems, she explains, eyes shifting with the guilt of someone who's almost definitely borrowed your final tonic for personal anxiety. By day's end, physical symptoms materialize. The shivers, the fever, the sensation that every muscle has transformed into agitated custard. You form a feverish attachment to your water pitcher. Food loses all interest. Even the quintessential Victorian comfort dish, cold boiled beef, fails to entice. The household adapts to your sounds of distress through multiple blanket layers. periodically calling out things like "fetch my cordial" or "tell the wallpaper to quit staring." On day 2, the visions start. Initially, minor disturbances. The clock running backward, the family portrait blinking. By midnight, you're certain the bedposts are critiquing your character. The oil lamp transforms into a Victorian magistrate, silently judging your sleepwear choices. At some point, you apologise to your slippers for emotional neglect. Should anyone brave a visit, you treat them to a dramatic recitation of your ailments. Deliver it Hamlet style. By the 3rd day, your family has acknowledged that you are temporarily incapacitated. The doctor stops by, clicks his tongue, and prescribes rest, diluted tea, and ideally reduced theatrics. You overhear him scheming with your spouse in the corridor. She'll pull through, might actually benefit her to perspire it out, builds resilience. The maid delivers watery broth and comforting words, but maintains distance, cautious of your habit of debating philosophy with the drapes. Day 4 becomes a haze of sleeplessness and profound anxiety. Every shadow transforms into potential danger. You conclude the wallpaper design is encrypted correspondence from abroad, spending hours attempting to crack it before surrendering and tumbling into dreamless sleep. The dog appears, nestles beside the bed, and listens patiently as you catalogue your numerous complaints against existence, including the unfairness of medicinal shortages. By the 5th day, the crisis has peaked. Your fever subsides, your limbs start recalling what stability means, and you can consider broth without emotional collapse. By week's conclusion, you're upright, somewhat paler and unexpectedly proud. The family marks your recovery with applause and the gift of fresh bedding. The doctor, never admitting misjudgment, suggests a nice glass of port for rebuilding strength. Eye the medicine cabinet with fresh caution. Congratulations, you've weathered Victorian withdrawal, a week-long journey of basins, bedclothes, and questionable perception. Your prize? Understanding that perhaps, just perhaps, restraint deserves shelf space in your medicine cabinet, positioned right beside the laudanum, just for emergencies. Between the substances, the gas lighting, the arsenic wallpaper, and the lead-contaminated water, it's remarkable anyone lives long enough to reach old age. Your residence, superficially, represents Victorian domestic serenity. Lace curtains billow gently, the parlour radiates warm gaslight, and potted ferns outnumber residents. But underneath lies an obstacle course of dangers so elaborate you suspect the designers were compensated per hazard. An ordinary day becomes a challenge of hidden perils, all wrapped in respectable middle-class appearance. Let's begin with the walls. Your masterpiece is a fresh coat of emerald green wallpaper, brilliant, stunning, and loaded with arsenic. Fashion demanded it naturally. Each time you stop to appreciate the botanical design, you're simultaneously breathing poison particles. Visitors praise the vibrant colour, then spend their evening scratching skin or nursing headaches. That's the price of elegance. Better existence through chemistry, you whisper, reaching for your calming tonic. Illumination presents its own challenges. The gas lamps flicker cheerfully, saturating the air with the comforting aroma of burning whale oil and the constant threat of carbon monoxide. On favourable days, you only feel mildly lightheaded. On rough days, you extinguish the lamp and question if the resulting headache stems from laudanum, wallpaper, or the atmosphere itself. If a lamp shatters, the room immediately floods with noxious fumes and a sense of looming lawsuits. For entertainment, you might stumble over a footstool and launch yourself toward the fireplace tools. Water proves equally menacing. The plumbing, if your residence is contemporary enough to include it, features lead lining. Victorian reasoning is straightforward. If it sweetens the water's taste, it must benefit health. You pour a glass, swirl thoughtfully, and trust the filter. A charcoal chunk and desperate optimism performs adequately. Otherwise, you default to beer, tea, or anything steeped sufficiently to eliminate whatever else inhabits the supply. Even furniture schemes against you. The piano habitually slams on inquisitive fingers. The fainting couch, despite its velvet luxury, conceals treacherous springs and occasional family treasures lost in the padding. The carpets position themselves perfectly to trip anyone daring enough to navigate in a hoop skirt. There's continuous household discussion about whether the staircase exceeds Dover cliffs in steepness, or if servants are inherently accident-prone. Cleaning intended for safety introduces fresh hazards. Bleaching compounds and carbolic acid get liberally spread across every surface, producing polished railings, gleaming doorknobs, and sporadic chemical burns. You don gloves, though the gloves themselves are dyed with substances that might cause faint nocturnal hand luminescence. That's part of the appeal. Don't overlook the kitchen. The stove spews coal and sparks, the knives cut sharply enough to slice bone and possibly reality, and the cat regularly attempts arson by dozing too near the flames. Dining is a daily wager. Undercooked pork, questionable shellfish, and bread so rigid you wonder if it's repurposed from ancient Rome. Despite everything, life persists. People adjust, exchange remedies, and celebrate each near catastrophe with another dose of something therapeutic. If you survive sufficiently long, you earn the designation of resilient as old leather, and deservedly so. Congratulations. Your residence is a gorgeous death trap, and you traverse it with Victorian composure, steady nerves, and just a trace of medicinal assistance. If the furniture doesn't finish you, the wallpaper will. Every periodical showcases testimonials from renowned actresses, socialites, and supposedly the Queen herself. You accumulate empty bottles as mementos. Victorian England has mastered celebrity influence, and nowhere does this manifest more clearly than in the aggressive, relentless promotion of nerve tonics. Weekly, you open your preferred ladies' magazine discovering yet another radiant duchess, acclaimed soprano, or minor royal praising Dr. Wimbley's elixir for sensitive nerves. The advertisements are masterpieces featuring elegantly sketched likenesses and solemn assurances that Lady Constance hasn't missed sleep since discovering chloral hydrate's wonders paired with light supper. Society's prominent women appear everywhere, granting interviews, authoring columns, and sharing detailed medical routine accounts. A spoonful of laudanum daily keeps melancholy away, reveals the Countess of Swansbury in a widely distributed pamphlet. No spirited woman should lack it. At theatres, celebrated actresses compete not merely for ovations, but for becoming the newest face of Mrs. Goldsmith's soothing cordial. Their endorsements carry greater authority than any physician's prescription. After all, if Macbeth's leading lady swears by her daily dose, who are you to dispute it? It's not exclusively actresses and nobility. Authors, painters, even pioneering female scientists get swept into the tonic frenzy. One distinguished novelist attributes her inspiration to bottled medicine, while a groundbreaking botanist champions a special French brain tonic that, she insists, stimulates intellect and soothes temperament. You start suspecting half of London's creative output traces directly to blended opium, brandy, and generous amounts of wishful thinking. The most prized endorsement, naturally, originates from Queen Victoria herself. The Queen allegedly prefers a particular German nerve tonic, rumoured to contain everything from valerian root to trace gold dust quantities. Whether or not she actually consumes it, manufacturers trumpet her supposed approval on every label as recommended to Her Majesty the Queen. The palace releases dignified refutations, but these only heighten the rumour's allure. Every bottle feels slightly more regal, knowing the Queen might have enjoyed a sip during a particularly stressful morning. As for you, resisting the hysteria proves impossible. You preserve the prettiest bottles, displaying them on the mantelpiece beside your commemorative spoon collection and royal jubilee plates. The servants receive strict orders to place any magazine featuring celebrity testimonials on your breakfast tray. At social functions, discussion of the latest famous endorser dominates conversation. Did you hear Lady Emerson switched to Dr. Bixby's pink elixir? I hear it's marvellous for nerves and promotes hair regrowth. Behind closed doors, naturally, things aren't always harmonious. Famous women prove equally likely to experience sleepless nights, pacing parlours and quarrelling with housekeepers. Celebrity endorsements magic is, like most Victorian elements, equal measures fantasy and frantic self-conviction. But that's irrelevant. If your favourite novelist claims her finest chapter emerged with cordial and biscuit assistance, you follow suit. Biscuit remains optional, congratulations. You're inhabiting an era where happiness, beauty and potentially literary brilliance get paved with endorsements and emptied bottles. The wealthy and famous aren't dramatically different from you, merely slightly more medicated and considerably better at feigning glamour. Exercise gets encouraged, particularly when you're convinced the wallpaper lives. Who needs Pilates with boundless, drug-induced energy available? For most Victorians, fitness concepts tangle somewhere between moral duty, social performance, and medical experimentation. You're informed that moderate exercise strengthens nerves, sharpens intellect, and prevents melancholy. Naturally, nobody mentioned you'd attempt your calisthenics following 3 laudanum doses and breakfast fortified with cocaine wine. Still, self-improvement drives run deep, even when you occasionally forget what you're improving. You start mornings with Swedish exercises per Lady Templeton's Guide to Robust Womanhood recommendations. These involve graceful lunges, awkward arm rotations, and something called the restorative bend, suspiciously resembling searching for dropped earrings beneath the settee. Each movement gets punctuated by fresh revelation. I am unified with the cosmos, or minor collision with the umbrella stand. The family dog participates, mostly accidentally, and soon everyone's at least marginally more limber, or possibly just bewildered. Next comes the constitutional walk. Your physician demands it, society expects it, and weather never cooperates. You bundle up and parade through the neighbourhood park, accompanied by friends, servants, and occasional hallucinations. Every tree becomes contemplation worthy. Every squirrel transforms into a disguised personal trainer. You wave at Mrs. Hargreaves, who's performing squats behind shrubbery while muttering about chakra alignment. The neighbours parade outside, each faction convinced their particular brand of exercise will deliver health, beauty, and perhaps a marriage proposal for the daughters. If you're feeling ambitious, you might join a fitness class at the local gymnasium, that temple of heavy ropes, wooden rings, and the fragrance of dusty determination. There, the instructor preaches the gospel of the energetic bound and the virtuous jump, urging everyone to spring, extend, and occasionally crumple in a respectable pile. You do your best, though a skull swimming in nerve tonic isn't ideal preparation for tumbling. Last week, Mrs. Wilton attempted to clear the pommel horse and spent 30 minutes delivering verse to the potted ferns. For those seeking gentler pursuits, there's croquet, cherished for its leisurely tempo, complicated manners, and the convenience of participating while seated for medicinal wine breaks. The primary danger isn't strained muscles, but surprise, philosophical arguments. Are we real, or simply pieces on a lawn chessboard? A completely reasonable thing to yell during athletic competition in Victorian England. The genuine mystery of Victorian fitness, though, is that it rarely concerns the physical form. It's about control, diversion, and the constant struggle with restless energy. You catch yourself pursuing imaginary butterflies through the garden, certain they contain the secret to your inner harmony. Sometimes you circle the drawing room to balance the humours. Nobody questions it. Everyone's occupied with their own routine. The outcome? A household packed with people in different phases of effort, all slightly flushed and increasingly certain this is what progress feels like. Congratulations! You've joined the Victorian fitness movement, where exercise is mystical, errors are frequent, and the most vital muscle to develop is your imagination. And if those butterflies remain uncaught, at least you're energetic enough to continue the pursuit. Eventually, the household men withdraw to the smoking room, secure the door, and hope for a return to sanity, or at least for the laudanum supply to expire. Victorian England is a war zone, and the men have mastered strategic positioning. After weeks of watching their wives argue about the symbolism of spoons, conduct midnight seances, and swoon dramatically into the blancmange, husbands develop their own defense strategies, their survival instinct, hide, ideally, behind a locked door and a dense fog of pipe smoke. The smoking room transcends mere sanctuary. It's a stronghold. Here, men release the tensions of the parlour and assemble in groups, bound by shared bewilderment and collective faith that the disturbance outside will someday diminish. Discussion subjects span from global affairs to the comparative qualities of various match brands, but the underlying message remains constant. What exactly is happening at home? The ceremony starts with the door bolted and the curtains pulled. Pipe tobacco, brandy, and a worn copy of the Times circulate like survival supplies. The men exchange stories about their wives' recent exploits. "My wife serenades the cat," one admits. "That's minor," another exhales. "Mine just painted the pantry mauve and summoned the vicar for interpretive dance." Nothing shocks anyone in the smoking room. No oddity is too extreme. When a particularly disturbing sound reverberates through the house, piano at midnight, Hamlet recitation from the landing, or the unmistakable clash of the parlour gong, everyone stiffens. The boldest volunteer to check, equipped with only duty and the prayer that the wallpaper hasn't sparked another dispute. Most, however, stay planted in their armchairs, debating cricket statistics as the reliable, sensible soundtrack of reason. Escape requires careful timing. Dinners are brief and tactical. Dessert often gets abandoned for pressing paperwork. The declaration, "I'll be in my study," translates to, "I plan to survive this evening." Sometimes husbands get cornered by an eager spouse brandishing a fresh theory about cosmic vibrations or the healing properties of fern observation. Courteous nodding and the occasional fascinating dear serve as essential survival techniques. For some, sanctuary exists beyond the home altogether. Gentlemen's clubs provide tranquility, billiards, and the fellowship of similar souls who all maintain that domestic life is as organised as their waistcoats. Long walks extend longer. Office work transforms into a spiritual escape where paperwork accumulates mainly as justification for avoiding home before nightfall. Younger men observe their elders, cultivating an expression of gentle confusion and keeping a flask accessible, supposedly for nerves, actually for courage. Sons receive quiet instruction in the subtle art of discreet departures and the hazard of remaining too long in the drawing room after supper. Yet beneath all the avoidance, there's peculiar fondness under the frustration. Tales of domestic turmoil get shared with pride, a medal of perseverance in a world where everyone is somewhat unhinged. The smoking room, despite its bravado, is a haven constructed on affection, confusion, and respectful acknowledgement of Victorian womanhood's unpredictable force. Congratulations! You've uncovered the supreme male survival approach. Patience, tact, and most importantly, a reliable lock on the smoking room door. Last long enough, and perhaps, just perhaps, you'll receive an invitation to the next séance. If you're brave, you arrange a checkup, mention your nerves, and depart with a prescription for precisely what you requested. The pattern persists. Victorian England's healthcare philosophy blends optimism, ceremony, and remarkable credulity. The doctor's office functions less as a centre for medical advancement and more as a revolving entrance for the well-groomed and the mildly anxious. You find yourself attending another appointment, gripping your symptom journal. Insomnia, sadness, existential terror, the sporadic impulse to arrange the silverware by spiritual resonance. The doctor anticipates you. Actually, he's been anticipating everyone in town. You're welcomed by the comforting aroma of camphor, pipe smoke, and paper already starting to yellow at the corners. The waiting area is crowded, ladies waving fans, gentlemen staring intently at the wall, and at least one child chanting Latin monotonously, possibly from syrup side effects. While waiting, you browse a medical almanac packed with guidance on everything from restoring the humours to the advantages of leech rotation. Everyone present has nerves, and everyone understands there's only one genuine remedy. The doctor, pristine in his frock coat and impressive facial hair, guides you in with grave dignity. His desk overflows with bottles, dried flowers, and a stack of prescriptions written in penmanship that could generously be described as abstract. You recite your standard litany of complaints. He nods, poses a few token questions. Are you sleeping? No. Are you eating properly? No, though the marmalade is addressing you again. Have you attempted stress reduction? You inhabit Victorian England, so that's definitely no. He listens, but merely from politeness. After all, the answer is predetermined. He grabs his prescription pad, the genuine powerhouse of the era. The renewal ceremony is nearly ritualistic. A few theatrical scratches, a flourish of the pen, and suddenly you possess another month's supply of tonic for the nerves, drops for delicate dispositions, and Mrs. Plumley's elixir of quietude. The sole genuine question is whether the ink will set before the bottle empties. Nobody inquires about adverse reactions. Nobody challenges the logic of treating sleeplessness with a formula that could sedate an elephant. Instead, there's a sensation of thankful relief. Balance has returned, the bottle will be replenished, and the fundamental chaos of Victorian existence will be momentarily tamed. You thank the doctor, who confirms with absolute certainty that the remedy is supported by prominent authorities in London and particularly suggested for anyone plagued by phantoms, indoor fog, or hostile tea cozies. Leaving, you encounter the next patient who offers a knowing smile and a slight tremor. There's a sense of fellowship among the regulars, a mutual recognition that the boundary between wellness and well-medicated is delightfully vague. You visit the chemist's shop, hand over your slip, and observe as the pharmacist prepares another batch of your personal redemption. There's no urgency. Everyone arrives for the identical purpose, and the procedure is half the treatment. By the time you reach home, you've nearly persuaded yourself you feel improved already. There's solace in repetition, in encountering the same faces and obtaining the same bottle month after month. Maybe next visit you'll experiment with something different. Dr. Spindle's energizing powder, perhaps? Or the recently promoted soothing pellets of composure. But fundamentally, you know you'll maintain what functions. Congratulations. You've perfected the skill of the Victorian prescription renewal, a ceremony of comfort, repetition, and the perpetual promise of one more bottle to correct the world. At least until your next checkup, you suddenly require more clocks, a third piano, and numerous new hats. Shopping provides comfort until the bill materializes, and you suspect the postman of sorcery. The essence of retail therapy thrives and operates slightly mad in Victorian England. Maybe it's the laudanum, maybe it's the agitation, or maybe it's simply the unwritten law that if you remain motionless too long, someone will request you embroider something. Regardless, a strange fever seizes you. The compulsion to obtain, embellish, and accumulate with a focus that alarms even your most peculiar relatives. Your initial destination is the department store, a monument of distraction packed from ground to rafters with every conceivable necessity and 100 objects you can't identify but absolutely must possess. The instant you enter, you're surrounded by a symphony of aromas, French perfume, beeswax, ink, and in the gloves section, just a trace of existential despair. Attendants drift past in flawless coordination, presenting you samples of hair tonic and suspiciously passionate views about umbrella handles. What starts as a straightforward mission for just a few essentials rapidly escalates. You remember that your parlour clock no longer reflects your disposition. Why accept one? You choose another, then another, a compact clock for the mantel, a carriage clock for journeys, a novelty clock shaped like a melancholy owl, and one massive grandfather clock that chimes every hour as if proclaiming the apocalypse. Time, you conclude, must be observable from every room corner. Next, it's hats. You require hats for morning, hats for strolling, hats for theatrical fainting, hats for when you feel enigmatic, and hats for when you desire to hide from the shopping list you just created. Every shade, every feather, every potential arrangement of ribbons and veils. The saleslady gently proposes that perhaps 14 hats might suffice, but you detect criticism and immediately acquire a 15th. Then, the musical instruments. A household with fewer than 3 pianos is virtually impoverished, at least in your estimation. You examine each one, test a few keys loudly to the bewilderment of neighbouring shoppers, and decide on a grand upright with a finish described as spiritually rejuvenating. The salesperson guarantees it's the selection of all the finest families, including several who haven't yet settled their accounts. Other necessities? Umbrellas in every dimension, parasols to coordinate with each dress, vases for flowers you have no plans to purchase, and a set of ivory-handled teaspoons for surprise visitors. No visitors anticipated, but one must be ready. Soon. A modest army of porters struggles beneath the weight of your new acquisitions, and you're left exhilarated, breathless, and somewhat uncertain where your carriage is stationed. Arriving home, you direct the placement of every purchase like a commander organising a battle. The clocks wound, the hats displayed in artistic towers, the new piano granted prominence in the drawing room. For a fleeting, brilliant moment, you are completely satisfied. Then arrives the bill. You regard the envelope suspiciously, convinced it is scheming against you. When the postman materialises, you contemplate accusing him of witchcraft, or minimally, of participation in your sudden bankruptcy. The household shares a tense quiet as you ponder the realities of Victorian accounting. Fortunately, another shopping expedition always beckons, and a fresh dose of nerve tonic helps you recognise the positive side. Congratulations! You have conquered the Victorian shopping spree, a whirlwind of clocks, hats, and heroic rationalisation. And if anyone inquires why the house is full of ticking, you simply declare it's for your nerves. Time, after all, waits for nobody. But your parlour is prepared for anything. All pleasant things must conclude eventually. The excitement fades, the insomnia resurfaces, and you're left examining your reflection, wondering if the mirror is criticising you. There arrives a moment in every Victorian household where the euphoric high of laudanum-powered productivity and shopping binges collides with the equally formidable force of melancholy. The clocks have all been wound, the hats organised by emotional weight, and even the wallpaper appears to be sighing with exhaustion. You find yourself lingering in doorways, seized by an inexplicable gloom, pondering whether it was the 4th or 5th piano that shifted the balance from joy to existential dread. Initially, you attempt to dismiss it. You prescribe yourself a change of scenery, a vigorous walk through the park, a cup of cocoa by the fire, or a prolonged brooding stare at the rain-drenched street. But the weather, the street, and even the cocoa seem involved in your despair. The family moves cautiously around you, mindful of sudden sighs and the danger of being pulled into a spontaneous recitation of Tennyson. The dog observes you with concern or possibly judgment. It's hard to determine. You resort to your standard remedies, arranging the bottles in tidy rows, but the effect isn't what it was. The laudanum now produces dreams of infinite grocery bills and hats that slowly reproduce during the night. The nerve tonic tastes like remorse. Even the fainting couch, your faithful companion, feels somewhat too bumpy, as if quietly implying that perhaps you've exceeded limits. The clocks tick in sorrowful harmony, each chime a reminder of precisely how extended the afternoon can stretch when one is feeling poorly. In your darkness, you become painfully sensitive to the melancholy that drifts through Victorian society like a courteous but persistent fog. Friends compose letters filled with wistful yearning and a hint of theatrical despair. The ladies at tea examine their latest episodes of the blues as if exchanging recipes. The vicar's wife insists she witnessed a ghost in the linen cupboard, but you suspect it was simply her own reflection after a lengthy night with the Queen's endorsed cordial. Nothing heals the malaise, but everyone offers guidance. The doctor orders a restorative vacation, preferably somewhere damp and distant from your familiar surroundings. Your cousin suggests a new variety of wallpaper. Nothing elevates the spirits like birds of paradise, dear. Even the postman contributes, recommending a lively round of whist or the acquisition of a mechanical foot warmer. You attempt everything. The wallpaper modification results in an afternoon spent questioning the significance of colour. The vacation to Bath is agreeable enough, though you establish a vague rivalry with the resident pigeons. Card games offer distraction, but not relief. Ultimately, you surrender to the melancholy, welcoming it with the same theatrical passion you once devoted to shopping and piano recitals. This, you comprehend, is the authentic rhythm of Victorian life, a pendulum oscillating between mania and malaise, invention and inertia. Society has constructed its rituals, its remedies, and even its furniture around the inevitability of collapse. But in a peculiar way, this cycle becomes almost reassuring. Melancholy is simply another visitor in your parlour to be served tea and a sympathetic ear. Congratulations. You have weathered the come-down, the crash, and the lengthy contemplative evenings of Victorian gloom. Find comfort knowing you're not isolated. Your clocks, your hats, and even your melancholy are flawlessly fashionable. And tomorrow, conceivably, the mania will resurface. Victorian England is nothing if not reliable. As you settle in for another night, ask, would you have survived the age of respectable madness? Or would you have been the party's highlight? One spoonful at a time, you glance around, your parlour clocks ticking, fainting couch slightly crooked, and at least 3 bottles of patent tonic gleaming from the mantel. The spirits of 100 remedies swirl in the lamplight, each one pledging relief, restoration, or simply a brief departure from reality. The day's exploits, shopping, piano recitals, midnight contemplations and nervous fits are behind you now in the soft hush of evening. It's time for reflection. Not excessive reflection, though. The mirror remains there and you're not completely convinced it's your ally. Victorian England has tested your strength in ways modern existence can barely comprehend. You've navigated the obstacle course of mysterious ailments, female troubles, nerves. The Wobblies survived the questionable expertise of doctors whose facial hair exceeded their medical volumes and become a specialist of pharmacy mixtures that would horrify even the most relaxed modern pharmacist. You've chased butterflies, genuine or imagined, through parks and parlours, argued metaphysics with the wallpaper, and formed lifelong bonds with the fainting couch. Perhaps you became a collector. Bottles, hats, clocks, and tales all arranged neatly beside your expanding tolerance for opiates and unpredictable shopping accounts. Or maybe you perfected the elegant art of hiding in the smoking room, quietly enduring the latest domestic tempest, armed with nothing but patience and a flask of restorative sherry. Either way, you adjusted. That's what Victorians excel at. Survive, adjust, and transform every inconvenience into a delightful anecdote or an occasion for another round of tonic. The medicine cabinet was less a cupboard, more a doorway, a passage to 1,000 small adventures and spectacular misadventures. It held cures for things you didn't even realise you had, and some you almost certainly didn't. Laudanum for sleeplessness, bromide for nerves, cocaine wine for inspiration, and soothing syrup for the children. And let's be frank, occasionally for the adults. There were tonics for melancholy, drops for delicate constitutions, and pills to induce sleep, or in some instances philosophical insight. Modern warnings about side effects would have been received with a patient smile and a reminder that, in the absence of certainty, enthusiasm matters considerably. You might wonder, would you have distinguished yourself, recognised for your legendary fainting spells and talent for rearranging furniture at midnight? Or would you have merged in, quietly taking your drops, composing the occasional wistful letter and hoping the neighbours never discovered the wallpaper incident? Maybe you would have created your own remedy, bottled it up, and marketed it at the local pharmacy as Dr. Smith's marvellous mood mixture, guaranteed to fix what troubles you or at least make you forget it temporarily. Ultimately, survival in Victorian In Victorian England's chemical wonderland wasn't merely about reaching bedtime intact. It was about discovering your position in a world where everyone was somewhat odd, somewhat nervous, and constantly seeking the next cure. You joined a great tradition, equal parts resilience and wild optimism. Congratulations, you've braved the Victorian medicine cabinet, made peace with your inner maniac, and learned the greatest secret of all. Sometimes the only thing more effective than a tonic is a solid sense of humour. Sleep well. History's watching over you, and so is that fainting couch. Congratulations. Your peculiarities have reached the local paper. Mrs. Featherstone experiences a spell. Parlour curtains, never the same. Suddenly, invitations flood in, everyone eager for a glimpse of your latest episode. Even your migraines have admirers. In Victorian England, fame is a slippery creature, often avoiding poets and politicians, but cheerfully embracing anyone with a talent for the dramatic. Society pages hunger for novelty, and what could be more novel than a woman inclined to fainting, spontaneous poetry, and the occasional public lecture on the moral dangers of cucumber sandwiches? If you are very fortunate, or perhaps very unfortunate, you'll discover that your nerves are your passport to celebrity. The process starts innocently enough. You have a spell at the church bazaar, collapse into a strategically positioned basket of crocheted antimacassars, and are revived with a splash of Mrs. Plumley's nerve drops. Someone, perhaps the vicar's daughter or a competitor with a keen eye for opportunity, notifies the local newspaper. By breakfast the following day, your name is printed across the society columns, positioned between Lady Arbuthnot's new pug and the upcoming sale of moderately haunted silverware. Soon the invitations materialise. Hostesses hope your presence will inject excitement into otherwise dull tea parties. "Do bring Mrs. Featherstone," they murmur. "She's so delightfully unpredictable." Your spells become the centrepiece of every gathering. You swoon during charades, recite sonnets during supper, and deliver spontaneous reviews of the wallpaper. People wait in anticipation, clutching their fans and sherry glasses, ready to witness history, or at least a bit of manageable chaos. Letters flood in from everywhere. People who wish you well suggest treatments. My relatives made it through with dandelion tonics and staying far away from onions. Meanwhile, admirers compose sincere verses dedicated to your delicate condition. One eager young man delivers an exquisitely drawn diagram tracking your recent spells, filled with emotional peaks and valleys, charted like meteorological predictions. Turbulence anticipated following Christmas cake, improvement by Tuesday. The household responds to these happenings with conflicting emotions. Your spouse wavers between satisfaction, "My wife, everyone's talking about her," and concern, "My wife, everyone's talking about her." The staff place bets on which drape will suffer during your next episode. The dog develops a fresh tactic, concealing itself behind the potted plant whenever visitors show up. You perfect a collection. Your fainting arrives at precisely the right moment. Your gasps are beautifully harmonious. Your thoughts on window dressings remarkably persuasive. It transforms into performance art, controlling your public image while maintaining some degree of personal tranquility. You begin to select your symptoms carefully, preserving your most impressive displays for significant social occasions. Events. Occasionally you notice your reflection and question whether you've become more performer than patient. Not everybody finds it enchanting. Several disapproving older women whisper about craving attention, and your elderly aunt sends a sharp note. "Vulnerabilities belong behind closed doors, darling," but these objections merely enhance your reputation. Even minor controversies are beneficial. Naturally, nothing generates more discussion than implying your episode resulted from Lord Beaconsfield's entrance, and not, as you insist, the midday heat. When fall comes around, you've achieved genuine celebrity status. Young ones mimic your theatrical swooning. Painters ask permission to capture your expression of beautiful suffering. The gossip columns wonder about your future plans, a restoration, a setback, an unexpected return to ordinary life. You maintain their curiosity because you've discovered the most important lesson. Nothing spreads quicker in Victorian society than news of a perfectly executed collapse. Well done. You've gained recognition for your sensitivity, admired, welcomed at every venue, and the accidental creator of multiple new movements in drapery fashion. In a society fixated on propriety, you've legitimized disorder. Not every outburst carries equal weight. You rapidly master the delicate craft of strategic timing, a spectacular breakdown for optimal social benefit. Never while the sweet course is being served, always ahead of when the real chatter begins. It resembles theatrical work, except your sole dialogue is, "Goodness, my condition." In Victorian society, demonstrating one's fragile mental constitution is essentially an athletic competition. The reclining furniture stays within reach, and so do the gazes of numerous eager spectators waiting to observe the next flawlessly performed exhibition of sensitivity. Collapsing, ultimately, represents the period's most stylish form of emphasis, a refined method to conclude a tedious exchange or initiate a controversy that'll fuel conversation for months. The initial principle concerns placement. Breakdowns achieve best results where observers are abundant but not excessively packed. Consider the sitting room, the grounds during afternoon refreshments, or alongside an imposing stairway for ultimate theatrical impact. Dropping in the storage area serves no purpose. Fainting on the stone flooring of the glass house, conversely, will definitely create ripples throughout fashionable circles. Strategic moment selection is critical. Too soon in the proceedings and your performance gets forgotten during the entrance commotion. Too delayed and you chance being overshadowed by somebody's pet. Next arrives the craft of collapsing properly. An authentic Victorian breakdown combines dance and spontaneous acting equally. The palm moves delicately towards the temple. The gaze shifts skyward, and the legs give way precisely right, guaranteeing a gentle descent onto the closest available couch or into the embrace of a strategically positioned gentleman. Shrieking gets saved for exclusively the most serious situations. Spotting a rodent, perhaps, or noticing that the jellied meat jiggles more than your own trembling. Loudness and force are significant. A soft exhale and batting lashes suit lesser disturbances. A missing hand fan, a shattered china cup. Reserve the completely unrestrained cry for instances of genuine catastrophe, an offensive comment regarding your headwear, or the declaration that Lady Bertram's dense cake has been pronounced uneatable. The objective stays focused, never confusion simply because, but rather a demonstration of anguish so masterfully orchestrated that even your critics cannot help respecting your skill. Naturally, each public breakdown demands a cast of helpers. Caring companions hurry to assist with reviving salts, decorated cloth squares and compassionate sounds. Less experienced attendees observe with wonder, silently recording details for their eventual personal exhibitions. Even the household pet discovers it should keep distance throughout these moments, having previously been confused for a footrest during an especially vigorous episode. There exist manners additionally regarding recuperation. One should never spring upright nor welcome excessive assistance. Preferable to raise one's gaze gradually, whisper something concerning the stifling temperature or the intense feelings and permit oneself to be escorted elsewhere for a healing measure of tonic. You might even create a wake of speculation behind you. Did anyone notice her colour drain? She must possess remarkable sensitivity or remarkable calculation. However, moderation remains vital. Excessive breakdowns within 7 days and you jeopardise your standing for authentic delicacy. The finest Victorian women understand spacing their misfortunes appropriately, guaranteeing each incident appears unplanned, distinctive and somewhat enigmatic. A strategically timed swoon resembles an uncommon blossom, appreciated by everyone, copied by numerous people, and comprehended by merely a privileged handful. Congratulations! You've conquered the protocol of public emotional displays, converting every salon and walkway into your personal theatrical venue. In a culture that celebrates the skillful presentation of suffering, you, dear lady, stand as nothing short of a master of sensitivity. Your physician recommends environmental relocation, therefore you're transported to the ocean front. There, you experience extended strolls, unpleasant-smelling therapeutic waters, and a striking vision featuring the sea god and a serving of shellfish. The sharp breeze accomplishes nothing for your condition, though you acquire a pleasant souvenir card. Victorian healthcare remains perpetually hopeful regarding location changes. When the family tires of your grievances, or possibly just your musical attempts at 3 in the morning, the agreement becomes obvious. You require a remedy that cannot come from bottles. Send her to the coast, the physician announces, brandishing a directive that's curiously absent any specific measurements. In mere days, you find yourself loaded into a train compartment with sufficient belongings to invade a small nation, headed toward a trendy coastal destination with the uncertain promise of improvement and probably one close call with drowning. Reaching the shoreline, you encounter the stimulating aroma of ocean spray, damp canine and factory smoke from the neighbouring settlement. The sandy area itself combines soil and uncertainty equally. Bathing contraptions roll across the beach like protective vehicles for the refined, while youngsters scream with delight and slight frostbite in the waves. The ocean proves stimulating, assuming stimulating means icy and containing dubious elements. Regardless, you receive encouragement from everybody, including the parish minister, to the coastal birds, to wade, frolic, or minimally be observed gazing pensively toward the horizon. The core of the treatment, though, involves the bathhouse. Here, the genuinely hopeless surrender themselves to the authority of sulphur-soaking pools and spring waters, each claiming an odour that persists well beyond your departure from the facility. The stronger it reeks, the greater it restores, the employees promise you while presenting a vessel of heated, murky fluid and a cloth that has absolutely experienced superior eras. During intervals between spa treatments, you receive instructions to walk along the pier for precisely 47 minutes every dawn, stopping exclusively to react to the gusts or ponder philosophical despair while examining the rescue craft. The food is simple, both healing and punishing in equal measure. Morning brings an egg with the texture of wishful thinking. Midday offers seafood heavy on tentacles but light on taste. Evening becomes a standoff between cook and provisions. Yet the coastal oysters are famous for reviving your hunger, or, failing that, inspiring you to update your last testament. Any stomach upset gets blamed on spiritual rebalancing, adjusting the humours, and they push more mineral water on you. 3 days in, you've formed an intimate bond with your bedside commode and newfound respect for plain crackers. Meanwhile, your thoughts are urged to release their burdens. This works surprisingly well, particularly after an overeager attendant triples whatever's in the spa's miracle tonic. What follows is a string of intense maritime visions. You debate kelp economics with Neptune, make friends with a mermaid who judges your headwear, and draft a short but fervent note to a wandering crustacean. When your treatment ends, everyone agrees you're remarkably improved. The true reward, naturally, is returning home with flushed cheeks, a pile of picture postcards, and no fewer than 2 outrageous tales for afternoon tea. Your family seems gratified, though somewhat concerned, by your sudden fascination with ocean creatures and tendency to hum sailor songs during breakfast. Well done. You've made it through the travelling cure, that blend of clay, minerals, and minor delirium. Victorian healthcare has worked its magic again, leaving you with soggy shoes, an unfocused gaze, and dubious wellness to show for it. You're not the only one. Mother believes the cat harbours spirits, your aunt hasn't rested since Easter, and the maid spends her hours reciting mysterious verses. Evening meals now feel like a séance merged with amateur theatre. Initially you think you're the only oddball among sensible, steadfast Victorians, but soon you understand that madness spreads, despite the doctor's insistence that nervous conditions aren't transmissible. It begins harmlessly with a cousin speaking exclusively in rhyming pairs, a grandfather insisting his footwear offers verbal support, or an uncle embracing a strict program of therapeutic geometry, fruit, and contemplation. The family's devotion to drama transforms into a shared pastime, possibly even a rivalry. The morning meal establishes the mood, tension hangs heavy, as though everyone anticipates the first hint of lyrical distress. Your mother stares into her cup, seeking portents. "I spotted a cloud, resembling a rodent yesterday," she whispers. "Certainly an omen." Father, stubbled and exhausted, mumbles about turmoil in Belgium, though whether he means the nation or the pantry remains unclear. The dog, typically the household's rational voice, now only barks at darkness and sometimes the coat stand. The real show starts as hours pass. Aunt Dorothea, once celebrated for her practicality, now proclaims herself a specialist in sleep visions and demands mid-morning sessions on hidden meanings. Your brother composes mournful verses and tries peddling them to neighbours. The maid, motivated by reading romantic poetry and an unwise taste of nerve medicine, performs impassioned speeches about the grime under furniture. The youngsters, determined not to lag behind, fabricate phantom ailments to score extra helpings of soothing elixir. Evening tales descend into gothic spectacles, with every flaw, groan assigned to phantoms, monsters, or great Aunt Edwina's lingering trauma from distant wars. The baby declares himself the rebirth of an ancient scientist, requesting only candies and a private workshop. Dining grows increasingly theatrical. Midday meals feature dramatic exhales and urgent health complaints. Someone always collapses, occasionally genuinely, occasionally from pure rivalry. The family doctor, formerly respected, now mainly mediates, wavering between ordering more medicine and proposing a collective retreat to the countryside. Away from any drugstore, naturally. Rumours circulate. Locals trade stories about your household's recent adventures. I heard the Featherstones held a spirit session during breakfast, or apparently their cat won't go near the greenhouse. Invitations to proper gatherings grow rare, while requests for theatrical performances multiply. Even the mailman grows wary, handing over letters with one hand securing his cap and one eye watching the family's swooning furniture. Throughout everything, there's a strange fellowship. You might be crazed, but you're crazed as one, a reality that converts the mayhem into an unusual unity. Family arguments happen in verse form. Quarrels about the final cookie expand into philosophical discussions about destiny. The sitting room becomes nightly theatre where the performance never ends, and every feeling receives its own ovation. Well done. Madness has spread through your home, and you're not isolated anymore. In Victorian society, there's nothing quite as reassuring as knowing your family members are equally magnificently deranged as you are. Hand over the nerve medicine and raise the curtain. Finally, the doctor swaps your wonder drug for outdoor exercise and moderation. The household turns strangely silent. Social gatherings become reading groups, and your journal shifts from passionate declarations to one-sentence noting felt ordinary, dull, might change decor regardless. After months of floating through existence on a soft haze of opium derivatives, nerve remedies, and highly suspect treatments, transformation eventually comes, as it invariably does in Victorian society. With reluctant self-betterment and the questionable smell of steamed vegetables, the family physician returns from a week-long meeting in Bath filled with fresh ideas about ethical discipline and healing abstinence. He orders less of everything, less medicine, less theatre, less verse. At breakfast, what you require, he declares, is oxygen. Clean, sharp oxygen. Perhaps also a root vegetable. The abrupt change jolts your constitution. The medicine cupboard gets locked, the fainting furniture cleaned and draped, and your daily schedule now includes garden strolls, controlled breathing, and endless servings of diluted tea. Initially, you object. You roam the corridors seeking forgotten bottles, hoping some remaining dose hides beneath cushions. You cultivate an intense nostalgia for earlier times, when merely hinting at nervous troubles guaranteed both notice and an additional slice of fancy cake. Domestic patterns shift. Social gatherings, previously venues for exciting revelations and scandalous laughter, now focus on respectable literature and serious weather talk. When someone references romantic poets, it's solely about the family pet's recent misbehaviour. The instrument gets played at reasonable times and exclusively in cheerful keys. Even the cat seems deflated, as if let down that nobody's called it possessed for at least 7 days. Your relations, compelled to abandon their imaginative afflictions, try transforming into examples of Victorian propriety. Aunt Dorothea directs her passion toward the local sobriety movement, giving stirring talks on the perils of overly sentimental furniture. The maid, denied her poetic performances, settles for organising the storage area with mathematical exactness. Your brother's sorrowful verses give way to an exhaustive and ultimately pointless effort to document every piece of silverware in the region. There are naturally occasional backslides. During wet afternoons, you glimpse yourself in glass and feel the familiar impulse to faint or write an epic about the unfairness of entryway hooks. But the moment fades. You fill another cup of weak tea, adjust your wrap and consider perhaps just minor redecorating. Nothing excessive. Maybe fresh doilies or two. The broader world barely registers your change. The gossip columns, always craving novelty, have shifted to new scandals. Lady Somebody's dog has acquired a fondness for spirits, and the mayor's spouse allegedly wanders while sleeping, hunting for ideal preserves. Your name surfaces only sporadically, always with nostalgic undertones. Remember when Mrs. Featherstone swooned in the flower beds? Such vigour, such drapes. In this fresh, calmer reality, you discover a certain peace. Days decelerate, patterns resume, and you uncover the quiet joy of monotony, a treasure previously drowned in Victorian frenzy. The journal contains plain observations, strolled, browsed, pondered the dog's thoughts. Occasionally you nearly long for the feline pandemonium. Nearly. Congratulations! You've weathered the great Victorian recovery. You're finally an exemplary resident, or as near as possible in a dwelling still resonating with distant echoes of verse, joy, and slight hallucinations. And if you redecorate, nobody's apt to criticise. So tonight, as you settle into your fresh, peaceful sheets, perhaps murmur a quiet gratitude to your forebears, the ones who survived an epoch when treating nerves involved a generous dose of hallucinations and at least one unplanned seaside journey. Because despite all the turbulence, the fainting episodes, the midnight musical performances and the grand shopping expeditions inspired by drops of opiate, those Victorians were undeniably tough. They survived undergarments so constricting they barely drew breath, medical supplies that resembled experimental labs, and a culture that regarded emotional explosions not merely acceptable, but essentially a competitive event. Let's acknowledge, enduring one day in the age of patent medicines required more than steady hands with the dosing spoon. It demanded persistent optimism, some willful ignorance, and the capacity to laugh, ultimately at your own misfortunes. Society might have appeared orderly from outside, but under the lace and polite discourse, everyone was slightly off balance. And frankly, it's reassuring to realise they persevered, even if occasionally with assistance from very dubious prescriptions. So, as you fade tonight surrounded by cushions, warming bottles and the blessed lack of toxic wallpaper, pause to value how much we've advanced. No more anxiety tonics needed. No necessity to rearrange the parlour at midnight unless you truly desire. Simply the calm certainty of being safe, being comfortable, and the only thing disturbing your rest tonight is possibly an active imagination. Because history isn't merely a record of hardship, it's evidence that humans, regardless of period, discover ways to manage. They laugh, they endure. And occasionally they even transform mania into a fresh version of ordinary. Rest peacefully, dear friend. May your visions be striking, your remedies gentle, and your ancestors forever amused. Good night.